Hey friends, you're listening to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast with Raina Wilson, where wisdom and real life stories inspire and equip women to make the best choices for themselves and their families. In a world where it's easy to always feel like you're falling short, whether your health journey looks different than others or you're juggling a million things, this space is for you. This show is so much more than just wellness information. We're not here to add to the noise. Instead, we're here to equip you with wisdom in the areas you wish you were wiser, so you can find hope and joy as you navigate your unique healing journey. So grab a cup of coffee or turn up the volume over the sound of dishes and kiddos. Let's talk about what it really looks like to care for yourself and for the ones you love with grace, intention, and faith. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. I am over the moon for this episode. So I can't wait to introduce to you Alexandra from Just the Inserts. Alexandra is the founder of Just the Inserts, a platform dedicated to empowering individuals with accessible, transparent information about medical choices. With a solid research background and a passion for informed consent, she guides others through the complexities of pharmaceutical products and decisions. And that's exactly what we touch on in this episode. We dive straight into child vaccine schedule, what you need to know to be informed as a parent for yourself and your family, and how to really navigate the pharmaceutical system to be able to make the best choices for you. I can't wait for you guys to hear this, so let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Alexandra, to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Like I said, we are all kind of just fangirling this episode. Sharing with my community that this was just an episode on my docket, a conversation that I've had with intimate community as well as our online community. So we're just so excited to have you here.
Well, I'm just so glad that you're excited because I get heat from all different angles. And so when I land in a soft place like this, I get really excited. So thank you for being excited and for valuing all of my work. Because yes, I do get heat from a lot of different people, different types of people. And it's so funny because I'm kind of in that mushy middle sometimes. And so I get just whiplash in my DMs. Sure. People be upset that I don't go so far on this angle. And then the next DM is I don't go far on this angle. And so, yes, I'm just very happy to be here.
No, that's super interesting to think about. And that was something I even shared as my husband and I were getting ready and kind of helping me plan this interview. Like, we did a lot more research. We dove into just some of your other content. We've been following you for 20 years, since 2020.
I was like, wow.
And once your face came out, I told my husband, I was like, she's here.
That's amazing.
So before we kind of dissect this monster topic, I would just love to get to know you a little bit about your family, and then we can kind of get into how Just the Inserts even got started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does your family look like right now? Just kind of a day in the life of Alexandra.
Oh, that's fun. I've never been asked that before, so that's a great question. So I'm a mom of three. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old who is now teething 4 teeth at the same time. So I do not sleep very often. I do not get a lot of sleep, but day in the life is wake up, mom mode. I do try to not be on my phone constantly. I am very adamant about that, having boundaries around my phone, because when I first started Just the Inserts, I was just so passionate. Sure. And I had this fire in my belly to spread as much informed consent to as many people as I could. I mean, many people listening right now probably remember what it was like in that 2020, 2021, even going into 2022, what that environment was like. It was like going to battle every single time you opened up Instagram. And so or just going to the grocery to get your food. So I definitely had an unhealthy relationship with my phone, with social media at that point. And so when I was deleted in 2021, it was the week before the federal mandates were announced. I was off Instagram for about 8 months, and it gave me a chance. I was pregnant with my second child at the time, and it gave me a chance to reset and to realize that if I ever were to come back to Instagram, then I needed to have those healthy boundaries. So that plays into my day-to-day. Currently is I try to get some time in the morning just to get those urgent DMs that I might get or emails, handle all of those. And then I try to be as present as possible. And so it's just like a regular day in the life for a mom of 3 kids. I mean, my oldest goes to school and so we take her to school and we go to the parks and we go to the public library and, you know, just a regular life. But in those little quiet moments of when we're standing in the grocery line or maybe I'm sitting in car line, then I'll whip out my phone and try to answer some DMs or maybe read a few articles of what's currently happening in the informed consent world. And then typically the afternoon, my kids will do some independent play. And that's where I get maybe like an hour or two of really just efficient research and content creation of inserts in the website and things like that. And then right before, we all know that witching hour from like 5 to 7. So it's just mom mode again and just focusing on that. And I've done a pretty good job at trying to leave work where it is, because I consider this my work. And so I try to like leave that where it is and not let it, because sometimes I'll get so upset about something that I read on an insert and then I will be short with my kids and I realize I can't do that. That's not fair to them. And so I try to like leave it where it is and then put my kids to bed, and typically I'll get another hour or two to focus on things. Now, that wasn't the case before. Before I got deleted, I was probably doing, I would say, like 7, some days 10 hours a day. Just constant research, constant interacting in my DMs. So I have a much healthier balance than I did before, because that's just not sustainable. And I'm a wife first and a mother first, and that comes before anything else. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background of what I do. It's funny, I was talking on Instagram, or no, I was on X, and somebody was saying, who are you to like talk about this? And I said, well, I've had over 10,000 hours researching this. And he was a little snarky in his reply. And he said, well, that would mean you'd have to do like 5 or 6 hours a day in order to do this over this many years. And I said, well, actually, that's a pretty conservative estimate. I've probably done more than 10,000 hours at this point.
Which is so interesting to think back to your comment at the beginning of just the heat that and tension that comes with navigating this topic. What was that like once you showed your face and came out from behind just the inserts? Did that change? Was it more positive?
That's a great question. I was expecting so much backlash. And the reason why I was expecting it, and it shocked me that I didn't get as much. The reason why I was expecting it is because when I first started researching, I first started sharing inserts. I did it on my personal Instagram. And I lost friends. I still have friends in my local community. I'll see them at the park every now and again that will not talk to me, will not speak to me because of how vocal I was. And because of that, I realized that I would share this research and then people would come to my personal Instagram, and instead of judging the inserts for themselves, they would judge me. They would judge what I looked like. They would judge my faith. They would judge what my kitchen looked like. I would get comments about the type of kitchen that I had or where I lived. And
like, people.
Yeah, it was just like logical fallacy after logical fallacy. And so that's why when I prayed to God and asked for guidance on what to do, he provided inspiration to start an account for just the inserts, and that's how it started. So when I realized that I was being nudged to reveal my identity or my face and my first name, I was really nervous because I didn't want that same thing to happen again. And amazingly, I had so much positive response. People just rallied. They were so excited. There were a few people who were concerned for my safety, and then there were some people that were frustrated that I didn't look and sound like what they imagined in their mind, which I get that. I understand that. Like you read a novel or something, and then you have this idea of what they look like, and then the movie comes out and it's nothing like what you think. Right. It's I kind of think of it somewhat like that. But overall it was really positive. And so I do appreciate that. And of course people are going to nitpick everything about you no matter what. And I've grown some pretty thick skin, but I did a lot of mental and emotional work before I did show my face to prepare for anything that might have come up. And so when it did come up, then I had already worked through it. I already prayed through it. And then I realized like, they're not attacking me. They're attacking whatever I'm sharing.
Yeah. And that's an incredibly just insightful perspective to take into this space, knowing that I think even with anything on social media, like people are going to always have something to say.
Yep.
And especially on a topic like this, and trying to navigate people's emotions and
Yeah.
their belief systems and maybe their regret, which we'll touch on later, that are all tied to just informed consent and vaccines in general. So I would just love to get started and dive into your story, how this kind of became just the insert from your personal experience.
Definitely. That's a great. Well, so I was military as well. And when I was military, I'm sure you can, your husband can verify this. Everything is a pharmaceutical. Any kind of ailment that you experience, it's all in the name of readiness. They want to prescribe you something so you can get back to the mission.
Yes.
And so even though I was an incredibly healthy early 20s, peak physical fitness. The best, physical shape that I've ever been in. And yet I had a drawer full of pharmaceuticals. And I remember thinking, for some of these pharmaceuticals that were given to me, the adverse reactions that I experienced from them were worse than what I had been prescribed to treat. And so it planted those seeds that not necessarily everything that you get in a hospital or from a pharmacy is going to be helpful to you. Sometimes it can actually hinder your health. And so I started researching just different things in my life. I had severe adult acne. Is incredibly painful, so painful that I couldn't even sleep on my side, even though I'm a side sleeper. I couldn't sleep on my side because the pillowcase against my skin was so painful. And it was just a very, very long journey, but it forced me to look at the food that I was eating. It forced me to look at the products that I was using for laundry detergent and dish soap and all these other things. And so I just started to overhaul. And then I got out of the military and I became pregnant with my first child. And because of all the research that I had done, I wanted a natural birth. I wanted to avoid that cascade of interventions that everybody talks about. But at that time, I just thought, I didn't know anybody that had done home birth. And so it was just crazy to me, which is funny because now I've had 2 home births. But at the time, it was just so bonkers that anybody would ever do that. Like, why? There's hospitals like right down the street. Why wouldn't you just go to a hospital? But I found a birthing center attached to a hospital. And so that felt good for me. I remember doing the tour and they had essential oil diffusers in the room and they had dim lights and there was a labor pool. There wasn't you couldn't give birth in it, but you could labor in it, and it was like had jets and stuff.
Oh,
and
awesome.
My husband joked, he was like, "Can I go in there?" Like it was, everything passed. They handed this pamphlet out that was very beautiful and it had all the buzzwords and everything just checked the boxes. Unfortunately, that experience was extremely traumatic. It was a 44-hour labor. I had some medical coercion, medical bullying that happened. That could be an entire podcast in itself, going through that. But through that experience, it really woke me up to the hospital environment and how we can have this idea of what it would look like. And sometimes that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does. I have friends that have had beautiful hospital experiences. And ironically enough, the midwives that I had in that experience were the ones that did the medical bullying and coercion. And the L&D nurse was actually like my saving grace, which is really funny that I didn't expect that. I thought I would have to defend myself to the nurse and the midwives would be, on my team, but it was actually the opposite for me. And so it just broke down a lot of these preconceived notions that I had. But let me backtrack. Before that, it was in my 3rd trimester, the midwife handed me a 1-page sheet about the Tdap vaccine. Right. And I had just been mentally exhausted. You probably have heard this part of my story, but I was just so exhausted of researching everything else. And every new mom can understand this. Absolutely. And so I kind of outsourced that to my own mom. And when she brought her research that she had found back to me, it was so incredibly polarizing and it was so fear-based and aggressive that my brain actually shut down. I could not process what she was sending me, what she was tagging me in. I just could not understand what she was talking about because it was, and I've given this example before, and I think this is just the most clear way that I can explain it. When you start researching vaccines and the industry, you start at fact A, and then you go to fact B, and then you go all the way down to fact Z. If you present fact P or Q or something like that in a very aggressive manner to someone, they're going to go in defense mode and they're not going to be able to adequately process what you're talking about because it's so far out of left field. And that's what happened to me. And that's why I focus so much now on starting at the beginning and then, in truth and love, presenting that information. And everything that I share is from .gov resources because I was presented all of this polarizing and very heated information, and I just needed to go straight to the source. That's
Right.
just how my brain worked. I needed to have that verified, credible information. I figured the manufacturer and the government would be the most intimate with these products, therefore what they had to say would be the most credible. And I was shocked by what I found. I could not believe that manufacturers knew that their products cause severe injury and harm, and yet it wasn't commonplace knowledge and it wasn't disclosed by medical providers. And so it just started to unravel this onion. So all this was going on, and then it takes a long time to go through that. So in parallel to that happening, I ended up having my daughter, and I had already researched the Hep B vaccine. And so I thought, okay, I knew that the next round of shots wouldn't be until 2 months. So I figured, okay, I have 2 months time to like really dig into this research. But when I was at the hospital, we accepted for my daughter, the synthetic vitamin K injection. Mm-hmm. And at the time I had thought because she had been in the birth canal so long that she needed it. Well, unfortunately, she was injured by it. And now in hindsight, after finding a manufacturer insert, almost every single adverse reaction she experiences listed on the insert. And yet I was never told that in the hospital environment, which is, you feel a sense of betrayal when you realize that the FDA and the manufacturer knows this, but the manufacturer... And then I found out that like most medical providers don't know it. And so if they don't know it, how can they tell their patients? But, so there was just a lot of things going on at the same time, and just trying to heal my daughter and really realizing I'm a firm believer that your misery becomes your ministry. And I can almost look at every single one of those experiences. And even though every single one broke me to my core and just shook my identity, my purpose, just everything. I had so much pride in my ability to make level-headed decisions and to be wise and have foresight. And all of that was just broken down. And it really forced me to rely upon God and to guide me through that experience. And looking through every single one in hindsight, I realized what he was doing. And I realized that the experiences that I had have now helped guide me on how to help others in their experience. And I can almost relate to pretty much everyone that messages me because I have been through so many different experiences, including when my daughter was injured, trying to find a pediatrician that would help me heal her without shaming me or scolding me for not accepting other products. I remember this one appointment vividly. My daughter was crying and just like in digestive turmoil. We had to supplement with formula. We were trying to find a formula that would work with her. And of course it was during a formula shortage. It was just like absolute bonkers. But I remember this doctor was getting really upset with me, and a male nurse started blocking the door and wouldn't let us leave. And it was just, if anybody would have told me that story, I would have thought that they were crazy, that there had to have been some kind of external thing, or maybe they were just reading too far into it. No, but it actually happened. And thankfully my mom was there so she can verify everything. But just going through that and then realizing this does happen and it can happen to anyone. And it's something that I stay up at night thinking about, that there are new moms dealing with this and they don't know what to do. And so with Just the Inserts, I created this free training course where you can go through within 2 to 3 hours, no email required to access, and you can learn how to find and read manufacturer inserts, and you can learn how to find your state mandates and exemptions, and you can learn how to make more informed decisions for yourself and your family, no matter what you decide. Whether you decide to accept all vaccines, some vaccines, or no vaccines, you have a right as a parent to make those informed decisions for yourself. And then I, deal with all the other things that might come into play when you start talking about vaccines. We talk about the history of polio from .gov resources, and we talk about herd immunity, and we talk about some of these really kind of messy subjects that can be very polarizing, but we do it in a more open and respectful mindset.
Yeah, which I 1,000% appreciate and can totally empathize with your birth story. And we'll kind of get into it as we talk about pregnancy and postpartum vaccines and all of that. But one of the things, and you mentioned it a little bit already, was our first experience was, thankfully we had a friend that said, hey, you're a first time mom, you're going to get shots. And I'm like, what? You're going to get shots? The baby's going to get shots? What are you thinking about this? And then having the in-person in hospital, we were at a military hospital at the time, experience of here's your piece of paper that says all the things you need to know, right? I didn't know any better. My husband and I didn't know any better. So what is informed consent and what is an actual insert? Is that paper we get during our office visits an actual insert?
That's such a great question. And that's where that contextual information comes in that I kind of go into. Because I'll get people that say, well, you're just the inserts and you talk about all these other things. But all these other things help you understand the importance of inserts. And the reason why inserts are important, and we'll go into like the one-page sheet that you got. But just real quick, before we even go into all of that, the reason why this matters is informed consent. You have a right to make a well-considered decision about any medical product that you accept for yourself or your child. And in order to make that well-considered decision, you need to understand the risks, you need to understand the benefits, you need to understand what ingredients are in there. And if you're of a certain faith where you might not want to have certain types of ingredients, or maybe how those ingredients were sourced, you need to know all of that, because all of that comes into play. And that's really what I focus on, is just providing you that informed consent that you deserve in order to make the best decision for your family. And the best way to do that is through a manufacturer insert. There are inserts for every single prescription pharmaceutical on the market and every vaccine, and they are freely available, publicly accessible on the FDA website. Now, if you were to just go to the FDA website, there's going to be a big long list, and it says US licensed vaccines. And it's going to be really, really hard to weed through it, because it's going to have trade names and marketing names and generic names and active ingredient names and all these different things. And then it's going to say the disease and maybe the different type of disease, the strain of the disease. And it's just a lay person will not understand it. The FDA has done a horrible job in making that easily accessible for people to understand. So what I do is I kind of create this bridge. I take information from the FDA websites to help you understand how to find the exact insert that you need. So say you have a 12-month well baby visit coming up. I teach you how to find the CDC vaccine schedule, so you can say, okay, these are the vaccines that are recommended, and then these are the different types of manufacturers that make these vaccines. So when you call up your pediatrician and you say, okay, I know the 12-month baby visit is coming up, can you tell me which trade name, which vaccine you give at your office? Because if you research the MMR2 vaccine and your pediatrician gives you the ProQuad or gives you MMRV or gives you Priorix or any other vaccine for MMR, you're not getting informed consent, because you read the insert for MMR2, which is different from the other ones. So I teach you how to, if you just got really overwhelmed, that's normal. It happens. And I teach you how to do all of that, so then you can make, again, the most informed decision. And then what I do in that training course is I give you the skills, or I help you build the skills that you need, so no matter what you're researching, you can understand when you read an insert, okay, if I am reading an indication for a medical product, I know that that means that is what the FDA has approved this product for. So the indication for, we'll say like Marilax. Marilax has been indicated for occasional constipations, short-term use for 17-year-olds and above. So when we realize a pediatrician is recommending Marilax for a child, we know that's off-label. You can just know that off the bat by reading the indication section. And then we can talk about, there's a contraindication section. The contraindications are medical conditions that are known to increase your risk for an adverse reaction to this product. That's important for you to know, because if you have a medical condition listed in the contraindication section, you know that the FDA and the manufacturer is telling you might be more at an increased risk. That's important. And then, there's a whole bunch, there's so much information in the inserts, and it's just gold. It's so much great information. And so it's really bonkers to me that medical professionals in the science community wouldn't want us to be more informed. It just, like, we research so much about our phones. We research so much about our cars. We research about products that we use for everything else in our lives. Why wouldn't we want to be informed consumers for our medical products, especially when it is so pivotal to our own health and it can help or hinder our health. So why wouldn't we want to be informed? So that's what I kind of focus on in the training course, and then realizing for the new parents that there are certain aspects of the vaccine schedule that we might assume about it. We're constantly told that they are safe and effective. And I kind of break down, okay, what does the FDA mean when they say safe? What do they mean when they say effective? Because my personal definitions of safe and effective do not match what the FDA has for those. And again, that could like take forever. We could talk a long time about that, but I do break that down. And just so when you walk into that pediatrician's appointment, you can be more informed. Most pediatrician's appointments average about 10 minutes. And that is not enough time for informed consent because you most likely will get that one-page sheet, and that differs from a manufacturer insert. According to 1986 legislation that was passed for National Childhood Vaccination Injury Act, I believe is what it's called, it allows the manufacturer the vaccine information statement, that one-page sheet that you get, to differ from the manufacturer insert. And I go into why that is allowed to happen and why, as a parent, that might cause some concerns. So again, it's really, really deep. The well is deep on this research, but hopefully I just sat down when I created that course and thought, what is everything I wish I would have known? What are the things that I wish I would have had from the beginning without having this polarizing, hostile environment? I just want the facts. And then once I did the course and I got so much great feedback from it, and then when I was deleted off Instagram, I realized, despite what we're told, the internet isn't forever. And so I created my book, Well Considered, a Handbook for Making Informed Medical Decisions. And that I have like ebook, paperback, hardback, all the other things. But you don't, like, if that's not in your budget, that's totally fine. The course is great too. That is a wonderful place to start.
Yeah, which I love because the show's called If Only I Were Wiser. It speaks to all of those places. And similar to your story, it came from this place postpartum where I was like, man, if I could just collect all of the wellness in all of these areas, spiritually, physically, emotionally, of all the places, if only we were wiser. Not from a place of shame or condemnation, but like in hopes to speak to the woman that doesn't have to walk through what I've walked through. So I can empathize and find a lot of hope just in your story there. And my husband and I are super excited just to dive into your course. We already looked into getting your book. So that was just kind of fun to go through that. But one of the things, it's been a hot topic for our local community, digital community, is what were the things you wish you knew about the childhood vaccine schedule?
Yeah, that's...
Which I know it's a large sphere to dive into.
That is a great question. And I think it really boils down to, and I was recently talking with a friend, and I really think we need to retire the term safe and effective. I think we need to just ask right off the bat, is it effective? Because a lot of what we're told about vaccines, and I just want to be very clear up front, I am not trying to sway you one way or another. Yeah. I have plenty of friends who accept vaccines, and I respect their right to do that. I understand and can empathize with why they're doing it for their personal situation. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand me when I'm saying this. I'm just sharing what I have personally found through years and thousands of hours of research.
Absolutely.
The perception that we have and the philanthropic efforts that we typically associate with vaccines does not really accurately reflect what's in the data and what's in research. And I say that because when we accept a vaccine, we are typically doing it because we are trying to prevent a disease, or we're trying to prevent a complication to a disease, or we are trying to protect a family member or a community.
Right.
And there are plenty of aspects to that reason that might not be true. And let me expand on a few. So for example, when we are accepting a vaccine in order to prevent a disease, there are sections within manufacturer inserts that state you might actually get the very thing that you are trying to prevent. And I know plenty of people will say, that's not true, that's not true. Well, they most likely have not read an insert.
Right.
Because it's very clearly stated on the FDA website by the manufacturer. And like, you can all verify this for yourself. So again, that's important for you to know as a parent. And I have spoken with some medical professionals, and it's really incredible to have some heated conversations. And by the end of the conversation, they realize that they just weren't taught this, that there are certain aspects of the vaccines that can also increase your risk to having a more severe complication or severe infection. And I'll give you a few examples. Well, recently we just had the influenza vaccine came out that you actually had a more increased risk for getting influenza. Yeah. And then I also have cited within my book, the World Health Organization talks about an inactivated measles vaccine where vaccinated children had a more aggressive form of measles infection when they were exposed to the wild strain. And so that is important as a parent. And I've communicated with these medical professionals that if there is a parent that believes that it is an impossibility for their child to have the disease that they're trying to prevent by accepting the vaccine, it will dull their observations of early warning symptoms for their child, and they might not seek the healthcare that they need, the medical treatment that they need, because they believe it's an impossibility for it to happen. And that's a concern. If there's a child that has early warning symptoms of measles or diphtheria or pertussis, whooping cough, or all these other things, and the parent thinks, oh, I'm going to discredit this system or this symptom, or I'm going to just think it's something else because they think it's an impossibility, they're not going to seek immediate medical treatment, and then it can progress into a more severe case of measles, or you see that pneumonia, or you see some of the encephalitis or anything like that. The other aspect that I think is really important is, and we'll just stick with MMR since we've been talking about this example, there are almost all of the severe complications of measles, mumps, and rubella are listed as potential adverse reactions to the MMR vaccines. So as a parent, here you're accepting it because you want to prevent these severe complications, because that's what the science communicators and everybody on Instagram is saying you want to prevent. And yet the FDA and the manufacturer said that those very things can happen. Yeah. Again, I'm not trying to sway anyone one way or another. It's just information that you need to be aware of. So then if you do accept those products, then you can be observant and you can seek immediate healthcare and eliminate diagnostic confusion and realize that this is a known potential adverse reaction. There are sections on the manufacturer inserts called limitations of effectiveness. Unfortunately, they are very bare. It just says that not everyone who accepts this product will be protected. And that goes into the herd immunity conversation. So if not everybody who is accepting these products are protected, how can we protect the herd? Sure. So again, all of this can get really messy and complicated, and hopefully I've come from an angle where it's okay to have these open and honest conversations. I think that's how you shift the culture and how you can have more of a collaborative and trust-building conversation with your provider. And I know, too, that there are plenty of providers who didn't know any of this. And they learned from their patients. And it's when their patients come out with them, not from a hostile manner, but in a very loving and, hey, I researched this. I would love to go through the data with you. Or I found this from the manufacturer insert. Can you explain this section to me? And maybe if they share things that don't resonate with what the FDA says, then you can say, well, I also have learned that the CDC has defined an adverse reaction as an undesirable medical condition known to be caused by a vaccine. And then you can have those, hopefully, conversations. Now, you might be met with a provider who is trying to rush you out the door because for efficiency's sake, they need to make sure that they're efficient. And you might have that provider who is offended by you asking questions and they have that cognitive dissonance. That might happen. But you might have the provider who genuinely is interested and has maybe had those other seeds planted, and then they start asking more questions. So hopefully that answers... It's a very long answer to your question.
No, it was actually after going through some of your content that my husband and I were affirmed in our most recent pediatrician, because she spent 45 minutes with us.
Oh, wow. That's
which
great.
Was absolutely unheard of. And then not only that, as we were talking through my son's well visit for his CYS check and stuff. And she's like, hey, I don't know where you are spiritually on your vaccines, but she's like, you just might want to know some of these upcoming shots may have abortive fetal cells.
Wow, that's incredible that she shared that.
In them. And my husband and I looked at each other, which we knew this going into it, but I was like, did we just become best friends?
That's amazing.
And my husband and I almost left in tears because that was not the case with our previous providers. And we're like, Wow, thank you, Lord, for a provider that we can have candid and honest conversations about making the best medical choices for our family.
I just got goosebumps. That's amazing. That's exactly what all of this work that I'm doing. That's exactly what the scenario that I want to happen. So for that to happen, especially in a military environment, that's
Yeah.
incredible. That
So,
may God bless her, because
yeah.
that was wonderful. We need to copy and paste her in
Yes.
every single facility.
Oh, absolutely. I have sung nothing but her praises to our community because I was like, we have, first of all, never spent that long in a doctor's office before. But she also was like, great, you're breastfeeding. Great, you did this. Great, you did this. Did you think about this? Well, here's what you need to know about what's coming up. You don't want to do it. You want to do it. Great.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So that kind of leads into the next section that I want to touch over because one, I have a vested interest. We're expecting another baby this fall.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And so we've heard, my husband and I have looked into just some of the things similar to your birth story. We had the full gambit of inductions. In a military setting, it's not what we wanted. We're a pretty holistic minded family, but we went in with what we could. That being said, what do we need to know about like an epidural or the Tdap shot? Thankfully at the time, ignorantly, I turned down a lot of the optional vaccines because I was like, my first thought was like, I'm pregnant, right? Like we don't want to.
I think a lot of us were like, wait a second.
I was like, no, because I'm pregnant. Now realizing, oh, you haven't tested any of these for safety, like you said, on pregnant women. So if we can kind of just dive into that there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the Tdap vaccine specifically, they hadn't tested. It said in the manufacturer insert for years and years and years, it said that there are no well-controlled trials on pregnant women. However, there has been an update, I believe, a year ago, and they did share that there was a very small study that was done. Unfortunately, I mean, if I was the manufacturer, I probably wouldn't have wanted to publish this in the insert. I don't know if they were forced by the FDA, but
Sure.
They were kind of, you can tell there's like some marketing speak. And again, this is just my personal perspective, but it was saying that the spontaneous abortions, so those are miscarriages, that occurred from women that had the Tdap vaccine was in line with the average rate. And so there's several ways you can look at that. You could be like, okay, well, if they got it or didn't get it, then they probably would have had that. Or you could look at it as, okay, well, this product doesn't prevent increased risk.
Sure.
Or, there's so many different angles that you can look at it. But I personally probably wouldn't have, if I was a manufacturer, wouldn't have put it in there. You really only want to put it in there if it's less. But, so that's just like a very small study that was added post-marketing, which, you don't see a lot of. Most of the vaccines, especially like if you look at flu vaccine, the COVID vaccine, I'm trying to think of the ones that they give to pregnant women, RSV vaccine, they have not been tested on pregnant women. And that is because before the product is brought to market, the clinical trials, typically it's called a healthy patient bias. They typically only have healthy patients. So they don't have those cohorts, or they don't have those groups of people like pregnant women, or they don't have some, pediatric studies, or they don't have those with certain autoimmune conditions or things like that. So that's important when you're accepting these vaccines, to understand that if you fit within that group of people where it wasn't studied, that you're accepting that product kind of as an uncontrolled test subject.
Yeah.
And typically for pregnant women, they will have a pregnancy registry where they encourage you to register. So if you do have an adverse reaction, then it can be informative for pregnant women down the line. So that's just important to know. No matter what product you're accepting, it's important to know that. The other thing, you mentioned epidurals. Now, I get a lot of heat for sharing about epidurals. I did a post when I first started with just the inserts about epidurals, and I got just hounded by all these L&D nurses. Yeah. And they just thought that I was just sharing kind of my own bias or things like that, and not realizing what I was sharing was from the manufacturer insert. Right. So what many of them were not taught in their own training is that when a woman accepts an epidural, they typically have to, actually, I might be confusing this with Pitocin. I might have to confirm this, but it's either Pitocin or epidural. There's a screw that has to go on the top of the baby's head. And the manufacturer recommends this, that if the woman is going to be, it might be Pitocin actually, that the baby needs to be monitored because there's so much fluctuation on who you are as a pregnant person or a pregnant woman, and then your child, that the baby needs to be monitored because there could be a lot of concerns if too much Pitocin is given, and it could be very dangerous. And so that is one way that the manufacturer says, in order to have a safe and effective experience, you need to have this. And a lot of women aren't told that, or they're told it's just a clip, but it's actually a screw that goes into the top of the baby's head. And so that's just important, again, for you to be aware of that before you get into that environment. Now, I do know specifically for the epidural, unfortunately, many of them, because there's a whole bunch of different kinds, right? Many of them in the adverse reactions section will list anxiety or depression. And what do we know from the NIH? The National Institutes of Health states 1 out of 8 postpartum women will experience postpartum depression or anxiety. And so we have a product that is administered to a large percentage of American women, and then a large percentage of American women are experiencing the adverse reaction that is listed on the manufacturer insert. That's concerning. I've had friends that have dealt with postpartum depression, and it's horrible. It is a horrible thing to go through, especially as a new mom, when you have this idea of this newborn blissful experience, and for that to be robbed from you, not realizing that it could have been from, I'm not saying 100%, but it could have been from a product that you accepted in labor and delivery. So that's, again, important as well. So I would recommend that if anyone is pregnant, preconception is the best time to do it. But if you're pregnant, I have a free motherhood guide. And I go through everything from first trimester all the way to postpartum of all the products that you most likely will be exposed to. And I also have trimester specific ailments and different things that I have researched that could help. I wrote it when I was pregnant with my third baby, so it was very applicable to me at the time. And it's so funny because, and again, it's free, no email required. You can find this all on my website. I've had a few women that were asking me where it was because they used it for their last pregnancy and now they're pregnant again. And so they are just giving me great feedback that it was so helpful for their previous pregnancy. And it's just crazy that they're using it now for their second or third one. But I go through like the things that you need to be aware of for GPS testing or the glucose test and the different, I don't go specifically in depth about ultrasounds, but I provide a resource to research more about ultrasounds. And then, I have friends that from past medical trauma are bound to C-sections. And I know that in the holistic community, many people will just say, well, don't have a C-section. And that's not, some women can't. Some women have to have a C-section. And instead of shutting them off to any advice, I created a part where it talks about C-sections and what you can do to prepare your body before, during, and after, and how to help to seed your baby's microbiome. There are things that you can do, and so I do have a section for that. And of course, I have a section for home birth, and then I have a section for hospital birth. So it's really for anyone. And I just come from this angle of, I don't care what you decide to do. Whatever you plan for, here are the things that you can have a more informed, empowered, healthy birth for you and your baby. And I also have a section towards the end of like the spiritual meaning of becoming a mother and how I believe that is divinely given from God, and some different aspects of in my own births, what I try to do for like pain management, and how I do believe that there is a host of hormones that are interplaying during your labor and delivery, and there are so many things that we have at our disposal to help that pain suppression and help that natural labor progression. And so I kind of cite that as well.
Absolutely. Well, now I'm going to just go binge that and send it to all my pregnant friends. That's incredible. One of the things, again, it's a little bit more nuanced for our community. Like I mentioned, we're a military family, but it's a common question. And it was one that I had in depth with my husband preparing for this episode was, is there truly anything that active duty can do when it comes to being informed going into their doctor's visits? Or is it truly, you sign your life on a line and, your body belongs to the army or wherever. how can our service members go in a little bit more educated and confident when making these decisions?
So there was this excellent resource a few years ago, and they ended up changing the name, and I cannot remember the name of it, but I can send it to you, and if you wanted to link it in the show notes. But they're incredible. It's a military family. I believe they have a chapter with Children's Health Defense, and they do a wonderful job at keeping up to date to the exemption process within each service. So it's going to differ from Air Force to Army to Space Force to all those different things. They all have their own HR processes that you have to follow, and there's different things like whether you go through your first sergeant or whatever it is in whatever chain of command that you're in. So I'll send that to you because that is an excellent resource, and they are really, really good at keeping up to date with all the different things coming down the line. And I'll be honest, when I was military, even though I didn't want to accept those products, I still did, because I remember at the time the base commander had this weekly briefing, and I still can vividly remember it. It was this spreadsheet of all the squadrons, and it was color-coded, so it was either red, yellow, or green, and it was the percentage of their squadron that had the flu vaccine. Right. And I remember it was like the first thing for every single staff meeting was that they would cover this, and if there was a squadron that was yellow or red, like poo-poo on you, that you didn't have that. And at the time, like, I hadn't even gone through this journey, didn't even question vaccines, and so it was definitely one of those things where I think that violates every form of informed consent and medical privacy and all the aspects. So yes, there will be that element. I don't know if that changed through COVID. I'm not sure. I can't speak to it today, but hopefully that resource that I sent to you will be helpful for anyone that's listening. And just understanding too, like there's a few people that are in TRICARE, and they try to like navigate through this, and just understand that all of the rights that you have, especially as a spouse or as a child, is the same for a regular civilian. Like you have the right to accept, delay, or decline products. And I know people who are international, and they still were able to have exemptions for certain products. So it can be done. I also have a friend who works at an embassy in an undisclosed location, and she was able to do the same thing. So I guess the advice, but not advice, because I want to be careful of what I say, is that there's an exemption for everything. You just have to learn where to find that through whatever scenario that you're in. Sure.
No, that's super encouraging. But it also makes me question, and it's just been something that our family has been thoughtful about, especially talking with others in our community, is how do you navigate maybe consumer guilt or just the regret or like almost the heaviness that comes from going from not knowing making decisions to knowing and making decisions, and some of the shame that comes with, well, now I do know, and I made these decisions for my family. Maybe I am or I'm not dealing with the physical health consequences, but how do we walk through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually just interviewed an infectious disease scientist, and she recently learned the intricate details of how fetal and embryonic cell lines are created for vaccines for development. And I kind of asked her that as well. Yeah. And I'm going to take what she said because it was so good. And it was, you do the best that you can with the information you're provided at the time. And so the decisions that you make with that information, you have to let go of that shame and guilt, because, and this is what I have said before too, and I agree with her, because if you don't, you will spiral into bitterness and shame, and that will rob you of the present moment. It will rob you of maybe the learned experience that you have from that situation. I know the temptation to kind of wallow in that self-shame. Right. Especially as a new mom, or just as a mother, seeing your child suffer from a decision that you made in an attempt to protect them, and then it do the opposite. That is a really harsh reality to come face to face with. And my advice is just to give it to God as much as you can, and just realize that you were trying to make the best decisions and you had the best intentions. And unfortunately, the system isn't set up for informed consent. And that's why I work as much as I do to try to shift that culture to prevent that from happening to somebody else. But if you are dealing with that and grappling with that, just understand that I know it's so cliche, but you know better and you do better, and hopefully you make more informed decisions going forward, whether you accept or decline. Again, there are some situations where maybe you accept a different manufacturer for the same product. Maybe they don't have that adjuvant or preservative that might cause the eczema in your son or your daughter. Maybe you find an alternative mechanism that can reach that desired outcome that you're looking for. And then maybe you start researching, understanding, and this is something that I didn't really understand, is how God designed immunity and how God designed the breast milk that comes from your body, and how that influences a baby's immunity, and how that skin to skin contact and that biofeedback that occurs. Like, it is, and I say this in my free motherhood guide, I don't like breastfeeding. I am not the woman that it comes naturally. I don't have that like beautiful picturesque, look of the baby. Like, I struggle with breastfeeding so much. But all that being said, I cannot deny the importance of breastfeeding for a baby's immunity, and how it cannot be replicated by anything man has come up with, whether it be formula or vaccines. It just cannot be replicated. And so to take a step back and realize that there is so much at play when we look at God's design in motherhood and immunity and disease prevention, and understanding that disease prevention goes way past pharmaceutical products. It's how you live your life. It's the food that you eat. It's your stress levels. It's your environmental exposures. It's your sleep hygiene. There's so many different things that come into it. And it can be really overwhelming, but it also can be very empowering, because you realize many of these things can be done without spending any money. Many of them can be done and actually simplifying your life. And some of them are much more cost effective. And so kind of going through that journey, you aren't able to go through that journey if you are dealing with that bitterness and shame. So realizing that might be holding you back, and just let it go, because you have much brighter things ahead of you.
Yeah. And that is incredibly comforting. Even my son right now, I was taking our friend out to get her sunshine time.
I love that.
Because that's a priority for just us as a family. This pregnancy is like getting in the sunshine, and it's
so good.
Free. And I have one more question before we close up, a little bit off script, because I'm just curious, just hearing you share your story, seeing this unfold, is how has your faith changed from navigating just this whole conversation for your own family, but also developing a platform to serve others?
That's such a great question. I have this shirt that I wear, and it says "Living Proof of a Loving God," and that's so true. It's so true. And there was this exercise that, I don't know if you know Shauna Holman from A Little Less Toxic. She's incredible. She's so good. We have been talking for years. We would send voice notes back to each other. And then I met her in person a few years ago at an event. And she's just an incredible human being. But she did this exercise this one time at an event. And she had all of us put our hands out and close our eyes. And she said, imagine all the roles and responsibilities that you have on your hands. So as a mother, as a wife, as a business owner, whatever you have that you're responsible for, imagine they're in your hands. Now, so many times we want to grip those responsibilities and those roles, and we just want to take control, and we get so consumed with these responsibilities. It becomes our identities. We try to do it in our own strength, and most of the time we run into problems. And then the other aspect on the flip side of that is that we get so overwhelmed by these responsibilities that we just throw our hands up, and we just can't even process it, and we just completely check out. And so it's this delicate balance of just keeping our hands outstretched and being grateful that God has made us stewards of these responsibilities, but realizing we can't do it in our own strength. And we need daily mercies to be able to steward these responsibilities the way that He wants us to. And so I did it before our interview today. I do it before I get on Instagram. I put my hands out, and I told Shauna this, that like it's such a good way to imagine like everything that you do, realizing that I have been gifted this opportunity and I'm to be a steward of it, but I can't do it by myself, and to invite that discernment and that clarity of mind and that gentleness and self-control in any interaction that you do. Having this opportunity, being the founder of Just the Inserts, has deepened my faith to a level that I didn't know was possible. And to do it while I'm also journeying through motherhood, because I started Just the Inserts shortly after my firstborn was, she was born. And so Just the Inserts has grown with me as a mother, and the fact that we've been able to do that together, and there are people like you that joined me at the very beginning and now are on, our multiple pregnancies. It's just this, I feel so grateful, and I'm so honored, and I realize it is not by my own doing, by the grace of God, that it's survived and been able to thrive is all truly all glory to him. And that's why at the beginning of my book, I have in Latin, all glory to God, because it's truly all because of him. He inspired this. He's continued to bless it. And I know that one day if it goes away, then that's his reason. And that I get messages from people that will tell me that they were in a pediatrician's appointment getting ready to accept a product that they really had no informed consent about. And a friend happened to send them one of my posts or send them a link, and then they were able to make an informed decision. Yeah. And, they kind of like put the praise towards me, and I'm like, don't give me the praise. Right. Like, it is not me. That is God. That is the fact that he is able to do that. I am continually just in awe of how he has used this platform and used these resources. So that is such a great question. I've never been asked that. And it just kind of gives me goosebumps all over to see everything that he's done.
Yeah. And I have a friend constantly remind me is like, you can't receive good gifts from the Lord when your hands are closed.
That's great.
And so I come back to that. I'm like, okay, Lord, like the practice of surrender and opening that and trusting him with everything, not even just our health choices, but with everything. Right.
Yep.
So Alexandra, is Just the Inserts the best place to find you? Where can we stay connected and get all of our community plugged in?
Everything's at justtheinserts.com. I'm on X and Instagram, Just the Inserts, and made it super easy. Everything on the Just the Inserts aspect is for free on the website. I don't sell to any third-party ads or anything like that. And then I also have Just the Alternatives, and that's more of the, like, if you're looking for if you delayed or declined, those options are there for you as well if you do want to research those.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I have one closing question. You've shared so much, so I'm excited to hear what you'll have to say. That we close with all of our guests, but if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for our community that is listening, what would you share?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh man, I'm gonna have to let me think on that for a second.
Yeah.
What advice would I give to my younger self? It's okay not to know it all. I think that's what I would have needed to hear. Is I was so adamant about knowing everything and clamoring for information that it became almost like a badge of honor to have read this book and to have consumed all of this information. And I think that's definitely a temptation. And it's good to be well researched, and it's good to make those well considered decisions, but to not do so in an act of pride or ego. I think that's probably what I've needed to hear.
Oh, yeah. And I could have spoken that over my younger self as well. Because you, like you said at the beginning, you go in as a first-time mom, you want to know all the things, right? Not from a selfish place, but the enemy is really good at his job to paint it in this idea of pride of like, well, now you won't know all the things.
Yeah, and it closes you off from learning new stuff.
Exactly. So, Alexandra, this has been a wonderfully beautiful conversation. We're so thankful for your time on the show. And we're just honored that you're serving this community online and in person the way that you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening, friend. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps our community grow, and I'd be so grateful for your support. Looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle? Check out my Return to Rest ebook for simple healing habits. And if you're craving a more intentional community, join Restore, the healing collective for the weary woman, a space where we dive into rest with a lens of faith and regular accountability. For more wellness inspiration, follow along at Instagram at WiselyWell or visit livingwiselywell.com for everything from podcast episodes to budget-friendly tips. Thanks again for being part of this community, and I'll see you in the next episode.